We've been meeting now for, this is our 7th year. You'll note we don't say we're meeting in France and Italy and Mexico and Morocco or Turkey. We say we're meeting in Philadelphia, Rome, Paris, Casablanca, Mexico City, Brussels, Istanbul. Next year, Berlin. We identify cities rather than nation states. And that's because, though the word international, which we don't use very much, is about the relationship between nations, interdependence suggests something beyond nations. And in thinking about the structures that global governance might take and have to take in the coming years, whenever I think about nations, I think about obstacles. Whenever I think about sovereignty, I think about obstacles. Sovereignty will remain a reality. Nations will remain the principal actors in the coming years, but they are likely to as often be impediments to interdependence, constructive interdependence, as they are facilitators. But on the other hand, as we saw on the panel the other day, and as we see so often in the relationship between mayors, between markets, between artists, cities, particularly global cities, large cities, cities over 5 or 10 million, have increasingly played a role globally as constructive elements in new networks that help bond together the earth. And even it doesn't work in every case, but in some cases, if you take New York versus Washington, if you take Istanbul versus Ankara, if you take Barcelona versus Madrid, you see even global cities that are not the capital of their nation state, but in many ways are related to one another in the world as powerfully as they are to the nation states in which they sit. And as I say, right here in Istanbul, we have a global city. Over in Ankara, we have the seat of government, an important governance venue for Turkey. But it's Istanbul we think of when we think about its relationship to the world. So to me, looking forward to finding constructive ways to create new forms of governance beyond the nation state that aren't merely international but are genuinely interdependent, I think about cities. And a number of people, Eric Karjan here, you know, is working on the idea of cities. Saskia Sassen, who couldn't be with us, has written compellingly about cities. The work I'm doing in my own research now is looking at the way in which cities might be new blocks, building blocks for global governance that don't exactly go around nation states but become a parallel path. And for that reason, cities have been so important to us. We will not be in Germany next year. Well, we will, but we'll be in Berlin. And there's the distinction between those two is absolutely essential. For that reason, I was thrilled when Mr. Mockus, the former mayor of Bogotá, who has made an extraordinary reputation as a 2-term mayor there, innovating civically, innovating in transportation, using an extraordinary personality to help bring together folks who don't always work together. He becomes a symbol of the new road to interdependence. And it appeared for a while that he might not be able to join us, and by a rather heroic effort on his part, he managed to change his schedule and be able to be here today. So for those of you who don't know the history of Bogotá under his mayoralty, for those who don't know the work he's doing now in his own NGO, an organization devoted to advising cities and taking the experience he had there, and for those who don't actually know, there are videos, there are a lot of descriptions of his time as mayor, and he, I think, makes Fiorello LaGuardia in New York look like a nerd, and you know that Fiorello LaGuardia was the most charismatic and exciting mayor that New York has perhaps ever had. So I want to welcome him here and ask him to open with his keynote because cities, I think, are going to be one key element in the future of interdependence. Mayor Mockus, please.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. I feel very comfortable with the concept of interdependence. Its cognitive force attracts me, but it has also an emotional phase. You can fear of interdependence, or you can have fun with it, play. I'm not a player, but life has obliged me sometimes in extreme situations to be playful. So the reputation is strongly selective, and much of my time is spent on rationalization, on chronograms and things like that. So, well, I thank to Klaus Offe the invitation to participate in another session where he helped to put the subtitle. The title was Policy, Innovation and the Culture of Citizenship, and his subtitle suggested and adopted was Tapping the Moral Resources of a Metropolitan Population. Bogota has 6,500,000 inhabitants. It was characterized in 93-94 by disorder, administrative lenience. Typically in social meetings, there were people offering, do you feel that you pay too much taxes? I can arrange this with a friend that works in the catastrophe. And even not at low voice intensity, openly. The crimes against life were growing a lot. Narcotraffics had its influence. Judges were very lenient, and there was low sense of belonging and pessimism. For me, the main indicator is homicide rate. I don't know if you can see from there, but we had in Colombia the level of Latin America in the 60s and in the beginning of the 70s, and narco-traffickers multiplied the violence by 3.5 for the country, and Bogota reached in 93 80 homicides per 100,000 inhabitants. Now it's 18. So from 80 to 18, it has been a work of more than 12 years, 3 mayors, including myself, helped to do that. Citizens were bored, and so they were disposed to bet on a playful change. There was a constitutional reform, a legal reform of the organic law of Bogota, anti-patronage dispositions, authorized self-valuation for real estate tax. Well, the main concept, well, sorry I suffer with my English, but I suffer also with my mathematical past. So I would like to be very precise in the definitions, but I have to rush. So human action is understood today better than ever, but it's very complex. So what is the most important features of human action that I use in my work? Motivations and regulations. I have worked more on regulation than on motivations. But motivations are very interesting. There is a lot of human action made by interest, and so the recognition of the importance of interdependence would be, in big part, the effect of interest. But also there are reasons, and sometimes people act against their interest because of reasons. And sometimes emotions are more important than reasons or than interests. Sometimes emotions and reasons make alliances that shape, reshape, or change strongly interests. This is standard in John Elster's work, who has been very influential in the reinterpretation of what we did in the city and why it worked. But my main work is on regulations. So I will ask you make a mental PowerPoint. There are 3 columns: law, moral, or morality, and culture. And 2 cases in each column. For law, you can obey law for positive reasons, for admiration to law, to legal procedures, and so on. Or you can feel a moral obligation to obey law. So law by good means. And the other is law by fear of legal sanction. Second column, you have morality. You can be moral because of the pleasures of being moral, or because of the feeling of a sense of duty. And you can have fear of guilt. So you have 4 cases. And the third column, you have social recognition, trust, reputation, that are positive mechanisms that regulate behavior. And you have, under the second line, you have fear of social rejection, fear of shame or shame. So I ask you, in face of this imaginary table, to choose what of the 6 mechanisms is the strongest for you. You have on the paper? You have the table on the paper? No. Some have, some have not. Okay. So let's ask you, are you governed more by law, by morals, by culture, by good means, or by bad means? When I say by bad means, it's by sanctions, negative sanctions. Who is the most? Who feels that he's or she is mostly governed by admiration to the law? Law by positive reasons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Who feel that they are mostly governed by fear of legal sanctions? Clearly, we are not in the United States. In the United States, between 10 and 25% of the auditoria raise their hands under pressure. But the United States has 715 inmates for each 100,000 inhabitants, 5 times more than the average of the world. So jail is effective, undoubtedly. It's very effective. But it's very expensive in human terms and in economic terms. The average for the world is 150, 160. Only few countries like Russia has a level similar to the United States. Who obeys the most, having these 6 choices, who obeys the most to his morality by positive reasons? Okay, so I'll take some photos. Click, click. Who obeys the most to guilt feelings? I am alone. Saint Augustinus would not be very happy. Who obeys the most to social recognition, trust, reputation, that are positive mechanisms of reinforcing behavior? Okay, that's clearly a group of leaders. Who obeys the most to fear of shame? Nobody? 1? Okay. Thank you. If I ask the same question about common population, not funds of interdependence, but common population, what would you answer? Common people do obey to legal, morals, culture, by good means, by fear of sanction? I beg? Law by sanction. Who thinks that law by good means is the preferred way by people? Who think that legal sanctions, legal punishment? Okay. Who consciousness by good means, morality? Okay. Guilt, social recognition, fear of shame. Okay, so it was equilibrated, more equilibrated than normally. Normally people say, I'm a moral subject, but I live with a lot of legal subjects around. So the main idea is developing citizenship, and citizenship demands to build up a moral subject, as we see, but also a legal subject, and also a cultural subject. And these subjects are subjected to different rules that are sometimes contradictory. So the main idea with which I work at is you have to make stronger legality, stronger morality, stronger social regulation, but at the same time coordinate them better, harmonize them. The big problem, I don't know if in the world, in Colombia, the big problem is that law says one thing and culture many times says another thing. Law says pay taxes, do not kill, and in a lot of spaces, cultural spaces, the contrary is promoted. So what we worked at was a lot on regulatory behavior. We reduced homicides, we augmented tax payment, but we did that inducing a lot of regulatory behavior. It's interrupting indifference, it's reacting. If you see a car that stops impeding the passage of other cars, make this 350,000 citizens' cards were distributed and used by car owners to control one the other. Social regulation, the third column. And for the first column, for the idea of law by good means, we used mimes, pantomime artists. When I made the press conference announcing the mimes, 300 meters by 300 meters in the center of the city were the space where the mimes would control traffic. One of the journalists asked, would the mime put fines? And I answered, of course not. The journalist said, it will not work, being coherent with the pessimism that the people, other people, obey to punishment. After 11 September, I was one day rather happy because President Bush was saying we will capture the terrorists and put them in the hands of justice. But the other day, the speech was the destruction of the devil. And there is a very strong difference. One day I wanted to say, that's the good way, the other. Well, that has had some repercussion in Colombia. So, to some extent, Bogotá mayorship tried to change the culture of Bogotano citizens. And that can be a scandal. Why a mayor tries to change culture? My justification was the possession oath. When you get mayor, the exact legal moment is anthropologically marked by an oath, where you promise to obey the Constitution, the laws, and to make them obey. So, to make people obey constitutional laws, we had to use art like mimes. We also broke the patronage links with very simple procedures. For example, For every people who wanted to have an appointment had to put the objective of the appointment. And nobody said, I need a favor from the mayor. And so when people were changing of thematic, I was saying, take another appointment, please. Well, the main idea is you are not a citizen from the moment when you are born. I do not know any person that is automatically citizen in the birth moment. As I don't know nobody that speaks. How do we learn to speak? We learn to speak because we are treated as speakers. We, adult people or brothers, speak to us, or sisters speak to us when we are a child, very child. We could imagine a pair of parents, very practical ones, saying the child does not speak, why we would speak to him or to her. Let's wait the moment when he speaks. It's exactly the same problem with citizens. If you treat people as citizens, even if to some extent they seem to do not merit to be treated as citizens, the fiction or the small fiction of bettering the other is very important. And that's, well, I have some experience in treating terrorism inside Colombia and in the university. And the main idea was that. It's even if there are clear signs of non-sensitivity to human rights or to legal procedures or to legal warranties, apply all these warranties in a sort of generosity expression, fairness expression. Sometimes, many years ago in these lands, there were competition in hospitality. And I was told while being in Oxford that an English king during the war during the war with French people, asked English people to pray for for the enemy. I like that kind of things. And sometimes you have to disobey the law, but then the Gandhi's gesture is key. I have broken the law, please. Punish me. In my case, more than breaking the law, I have broken sometimes cultural rules, and I have justified myself. I make sometimes small sacrileges, forgetting the recognition of the existence of the sacred. Well, all this in metaphoric sense. I was married by civil marriage in a circus, and a Jesuit that was participating as witness said the magistral phrase, "This is not a religious act." This is not a religious act. Okay, so the Citizenship Culture program worked for 2 times 3 years. The objectives were more voluntary compliance with norms, more citizens peacefully making others to comply with norms, peaceful solution of conflicts with help of a shared vision of the city, and communication, more communication, expression and interpretation among citizens through arts, culture, recreation, and sports. Well, I don't know. No. These are the cards. The cards had an inscription, Bogotá coqueta, Bogotá flirtatious, because Bogotá was ugly. It's not the case in this moment, but I loved it, but it was clearly consensually ugly, an ugly city. But we all know ugly people that are very popular. They are flirtatious. If you cannot change your hardware, please change at least your software. We arranged to enhance the capacity of collective actions in the city. We had a very big trouble with water, and instead of cutting water, the traditional solution, we asked people to save voluntary water. The first week, we had 2% more consumption. We discovered that even in some of our houses of the team, people were putting water in vessels, in any case. So people did not believe even in our houses, in what we were promoting. This is a beautiful example of cultural scripts. What's the cultural script? The mayor asks people to save water, but people know that the mayor next day will say, nobody save it, or almost nobody save it, so please accept the restriction. So we arranged it to manage, and it was incredible. All the days, all the weeks, we were speaking about water consumption. We used a saint's picture because San Rafael was the dam, the name of the dam where the reserve of water was. So instead of the please do not waste water, it was San Rafael. It was Marcel Duchamp was remembered. Okay, so, well, we made a lot of things, not only Cultura Ciudadana, not only citizenship culture, but we also worked on more traditional measures, like making better jail. To some small dismanner authors, when there was reincidence, we went together to balayer, barrer. Sweep, to sweep the jail. It's better go for 2 or 3 hours to sweep the jail than to enter it for weeks or months. It was dissuasion. Well, today, this is a graph of homicide rates in cities. We have more than 200 in Caracas in this moment, in San Salvador, in Central America, 150 per 100 inhabitants by year. Bogota was in 93 at the level of Recife, 80, and now it is in 18. Colombia was in 75, it's in 35. For reducing accidents, deaths in traffic accidents, more exactly, we introduced the carrot law. In Colombian language, to be carrot is to be self-restricted. It's a little bit boring. It has a little bit bad connotation. So we arranged it to change the connotation. I am carrot, and let me be carrot first. Do not oblige me as it happens in machismo culture, that people force you to drink. So instead of selling alcohol until 4 o'clock in the morning, until 1 o'clock in the morning, we eliminated the traffic traditional police. Well, the mime substitution was the preparation. 9 months after that, 2,300 police officers went out. We promoted seatbelt use, better pre-hospital care, though not only cultural things, but also operational material things like better pre-hospital care. We market the 5,000 places where in the last 5 years there had been pedestrians killed by car accidents. We market a star with cross form, and that all these steps reduce it from 24 deaths per 100,000 inhabitants to 8, from 24 to 8. We raised also That's one of my proudness motive. We multiplied tax payment. We made several things, a lot of rational defense of taxes. But one of the most playful things was contracting privately the team of the mayorship, mariachi. And there is a song of mariachi that says, llorar, llorar, to cry, cry, and cry. And instead of cry, 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 we chanted pay and pay and pay. And the beginning of the song is, I'm continue to be the king, but we change it. The contributor is the king. Well, we tried it because the society was aware that we were using some money for this kind of things. So we tried to measure results. Have you seen a neighbor leaving its dog excrements in a public space? Yes, 48%, from which did not do anything, 71% of the 48. Looked for an authority, 1%. Aggressed verbally, 3%. Aggressed physically, fortunately, 0%. Corrected kindly and the transgressor took it badly, 70%. 17%. Corrected kindly and the transgressors took it kindly, 8%. So it's almost 10 times more social control for a small misdemeanor than control by authorities. There is a big potential. We have compared now several cities in justifications for breaking the law. In Colombia, the most frequent studied justification is family. So almost half of the people answer that for family or for making justice, they would break the law. Approximately 25% would make violent acts, violence. So we are working with Mexico City. Mexico City mayor is going to correct the chewing gum problem. I didn't know that there was a chewing gum problem. Well, in face of water saving or some, the chewing gum problem seemed to me a sort of liviandad. But he made a discourse in face of 1,400 leaders showing very clearly that that person that throws in the street a chewing gum is obviously being unconsiderate with the strangers. And the main idea of Cultura Ciudadana is respecting the stranger, respecting the unknown. When you live in big cities, you can use an anonymous relation for exploiting, for abusing the other people. Or you can, on the contrary, conform yourself to an ethic where the most unknown is the person, the most respectful you manifest. Well, it can be rephrased in human rights language. In security, we are known in Latin America for our very good results, and we changed language. Journalists wanted me to speak about security, and I spoke about citizenship formation, qualification. Policemen were named by me and by some members of my team as citizens who form other citizens. Priority was protection of life in homicides. For example, I had went to 3 car theft seminars because assurance companies have the right to organize them. But I promised it in my first security committee meeting, I promised that I will not go to car theft seminars before having more seminars about homicides. The general idea was summarized with the lemma written on the wall of a cemetery, "Life is sacred." We adopted an epidemiological approach, and in some cases it can alleviate some kind of guilt, but in some cases it permits speaking about violence, especially in the family. We worked on risk factors, not only on alcohol, also on firearms, on family violence. And we committed to present the results to the society every month. We also increased investments in telecommunications, transport, training of police and judiciary police. There is some kind of similitude to Giuliani's work, but Giuliani put policemen to make correction of small fouls. A society like Colombia cannot do this by policing. It has to be, the population, the citizens have to help, but not by punishment, but by cultural dissuasion, by pedagogy. We promoted alternative settlement of conflicts, 20 family commissaries and 12 mediation centers. We trained 8,000 leaders. The jail was improved, more respect to human rights. Other crucial steps were better services for citizens, liberation of public space from illegal publicity, from vendors, from cars invasion. The very simple idea that the law is for all. Also, we worked on the idea rights, not favors. I don't know in the rest of the world, but in Colombia it's horrible. You have a beautiful constitution, you have guarantees of rights, and a lot of people continue to say, thank you, it's a favor, how kind are you? Public servants have the duty of warranting rights. What are summarizing what are the principles? There is not a single regulation system. There are three: law, morals, and culture. There is not only legal impunity. There are three other impunities. No, there are three impunities in total: legal, moral, and cultural. People that should feel guilt and do not feel guilt, or people that should feel shame and do not feel shame. And those things are hurting, and the strength and coherence of rules facilitate agreements. In 2002, there was a World report of World Health Organization about violence and health. I was in Brussels in the act of eliciting this book. It was a very strange moment for my life. The most violent country on that report, it has changed, but in that moment, in that report, the most violent by homicides was Colombia. The most violent by suicides was Lithuania, the country of my fathers. Looking more closely to the data, Japan is an incredible antipode culturally from Colombia. In Colombia, for one suicide, you have 10 homicides. In Japan, for one homicide, you have 25 suicides. Japan has the lowest homicide rate, 0.6. I remember Latin America has 20, Colombia has 36. So in face of homicide, Japanese people respect life 60 times more than Colombians. But in face of suicide, it's about 5 times more risky to be Japanese. Okay, so I just want to show you some strange. Well, for many years I was an apologist of written work. Well, as president of the university, I have to encourage people for writing. And I continue to try to write down some of the ideas. But I use also things. This is a ring that has the form of Moebius strip. This is the ring of my marriage. It's also the ring of the 3 teams that I have directed. The Moebius strip, I don't know if all you know, you take a piece of long paper, and instead of closing it normally as a normal ring, you make it half a turn, 180 degrees, and you pega. Bend, glue. And so it becomes a surface that has only one side. Locally, clearly it has 2 sides and 2 borders locally. But if you walk on it, if you allow yourself or your mind to make the trip along, you discover that without changing of side, you are on what seemed to be the other side. So it's a possible symbol for interdependence. The conflicts are local. The differences are experimented as very clear and heavy, and you cannot, in the name of interdependence, dissolve them. But you can look at them as very local. Humanity took many hundreds of years to accept the sphere model. Locally, there is clearly an up and a down, but globally not. Globally, we accept that up and down is relative to the city. So in some contexts, for example, when I had conflicts as mayor, I used this Moebius strip to remember that our conflict is confined. It's a sort of symbol against total war. Total war was worked about by Lenin, was worked by Carl Schmitt. Total war is a big problem. Well, the declaration of total war, for example, Mexico, in last 2 years has declared a sort of total war against narco-traffickers. And the idea of occupying the government of the question of the narco-traffickers was urgent, and it's absolutely legitimate. But the psychology and the language is not useful for the cause. I have to say thank you to Benjamin and to Orlando Leoluca. The first person who spoke to me about this movement was Leoluca Orlando. It's the only mayor that I know in the world that has used cultural movements against mafia. It's like asking Gandhi what would he do in Mexico or in Colombia. We are too much hedonistic to be Gandhi, or to have Gandhis perhaps, but we have a lot to learn of them, of Gandhi and his successors. So thank you to the Life for being here. Thank you.